Welcome back to the Worldtellers podcast. I started recording in the middle of Finn describing something he's been listening to or watching in reference to like Civil War generals and ranking those generals, and we somehow tie that back into our faith walk. But starting next week, we're going to open up with a particular passage of Scripture and use that as a jumping off point to what I think will lead to some really good discussions and ultimately, being an encouragement to anybody who might be listening. But hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode, and thanks for listening.
Out west.
Yeah, I'm
maybe
probably
Tennessee.
The other name sounds more familiar to me.
And then Joseph B. Johnston, I think was his name. He survived the
Guys
war.
Nerds, man.
Dude, turn it on.
But he was more of like a...
It is.
They said he was more of like a D general.
A D?
Yeah, I was surprised by some of the ratings.
Who,
Lee was the only one in the South that got an A.
what about Meade?
I think Meade was a C.
There's not really, what about Grant?
Grant was
Ulysses?
They had B. They had Grant as a B.
So who else was an A? Was there any Union
like
generals?
An unknown Union general called, I don't remember his first
Hancock?
name. But Thomas.
What about Hancock?
I think he was a C.
Dude, the Union just
So
overwhelmed with...
the requirement you had to have independent command in a battle was, I guess, vaguely the criteria, and you had to have individual command over at least 15,000 troops. Independent command. So that he was like Longstreet, Jackson, Ewell, A.P. Hill. He's like they were stellar under Lee or under somebody else. They were just amazing on their own. I think he gave Jackson, which was, I think Jackson got a B, and so did Longstreet. But Lee was the only Confederate general that got an A.
Who is this guy, man? Who's this guy
don't
that's
know.
decided that
How
he's
did
the...
you end up on
He's
this?
not the arbiter of all truth on this, because there's probably a lot of people that would vehemently disagree.
Also,
Anyways,
Never
so
occurred to me
the way he basically...
are you a history buff?
not like Civil War or anything like that.
Or just anything that... Just history in
Dude, I
general.
He also thought highly of Rosecrans on the Union side.
I don't know if I'm familiar with Rosecrans.
He, I think he got pretty badly beat at the Battle of Chickamauga.
Chickamauga.
The only reason I know all this is because I just listened to like 5 hours of this yesterday.
I'll tell you what, I
That's
wouldn't
how
want to
much
be in
driving I did.
Andersonville back in the day.
No, that's miserable.
Quite
Are we? This is not.
Well, no, okay, so this is interesting.
This
So
is just going to be a snippet.
we were listening. Well, I don't know, man. This could turn into a podcast. And Jonathan's. Well, I guess if this does turn into a podcast, Jonathan is not here today. Just so if you don't hear the wise wisdom of brother Jonathan. But Chess and I, during our free time, talking about what are we filling ourselves with. But her and I have been watching Band of Brothers, and so when you talk about different leaders and stuff, you got like Dick Winters, who seems to be like the epitome of a good leader, and then Lieutenant Dyke takes over the company during the Battle of the Bulge, and the opposite of that, very absent and not present. And then when they get thrown into a battle, he pretty much just freezes up. And then Lieutenant Spears jumps in, who's like pretty much just straight up like Wild
When
West.
you said Dyke first, I was picturing Spears. I was like, I thought it was
Yeah. So Lieutenant Dyke comes in, but Lieutenant Dyke just pretty much comes in and just takes over. And what's interesting though is Lieutenant Dyke in a previous episode has a conversation with a young soldier who's pretty much like scared, and he said the problem that you have is you think that Lieutenant Spears has a conversation with Private Blythe in the second episode, I think, Karen Tan, or third episode, and pretty much like, the problem, Blythe, is now there's gonna be I'll twist this a little bit out in the back end, but he told him, he said, you still have a hope. He said, the moment you recognize that you're already dead, you have nothing to fear. And so obviously there's an aspect where I glean truth from that as a Christian, because there's an aspect like what holds me back in most areas, what prevents me from stepping forward, why do I have fear sometimes or anxiousness sometimes or whatever. It's because it's a self-focus. It's a self-preservation mode kicking in. I want to look good. I want to make sure I'm secure. And what Lieutenant Spears is saying, you will have complete and utter freedom in the most hectic and chaotic and literally deadly environments the moment you recognize you're already dead. And as Christians, we profess, and you had read something a long time ago out of one of your study Bibles, pretty much like a soldier, like an army where soldiers are already
What is I'm trying to think of the word.
As you're thinking of it, but it was like, yeah, man, that resonates as a Christian. It's like the more I walk in the realization that I've been crucified with Christ and it's no longer I who live, it's Christ who lives in me.
What is the word? I can't think of it.
Resign yourself to your
immortality, Jesus, bigote.
What does the word have to do with?
It's kind of like this.
Do you know the definition of the word?
Do you know some synonyms?
Like if you're basically
synonyms,
you know that you're going to die, and you're bravely facing that. Oh my gosh, I cannot.
That sounds morbid.
Courageous.
No.
Red Badge of Courage. Civil War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he run off and then he eventually came back and
Then he
found another?
carried the colors.
Yeah. Does he get killed?
I don't remember.
I remember getting some AR points for that back in 5th grade. W.R. Odell Elementary. Then the Hardy Boys, man. Oh my gosh, Hardy Boys were
Expendable.
Expendable. Wow, man. Yeah. Have you seen Expendables 3?
No.
Sylvester Stallone. I'm just kidding. Dolph Lundgren. Expendable. Yeah, that's good. That's a good word. But we want to be like, you guys are expendable. I'm not. I need to make it back home to my wife and my kids. You guys can die on the front lines.
To hold on to.
Right. So how do we as Christians walk out the reality that we are dead? So the more we recognize that, the less we hesitate and the less we probably overthink. Anyway, Civil War generals, Lieutenant Spears, don't be Dyke. Winters is probably a good role model.
Good example of both.
He said on the night of D-Day, after making it through D-Day, he said that he made a promise to God. He said, God, if you get me through this, when I get back home, I'll live a quiet life, a peaceful life. I think something else about, like, I'm not picking up an arm again or something. But
What there's a verse that says that, like, almost explicitly.
One of the Thessalonians.
yeah.
Make it your effort to live a quiet life.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Is that an explicit, like, everybody should do
remember.
that?
I can't remember the.
Because it's like, Paul, you're not doing that.
I think it was. I can't remember the context of it, to be honest.
Context is somewhat irrelevant most of the time, right, Brett?
It's king.
Huh?
It's king.
Yeah, king.
I can do all things through Christ. He strengthens me.
Are you gonna find it?
I'm going to try to.
1 Thessalonians 5, maybe.
Well, you're looking for that, I guess.
Yeah,
you asked the question, is that an explicit command for everybody to follow? Or is it a general tidbit of wisdom, guidance, that is something that you could implement in your life, but also it's not like that's how you have to live your life? I don't know. I don't think it's for everybody all the time in every circumstance and situation, but
I think it was addressing. Something to do. I can't remember. Because it was addressing a certain situation, I believe.
Living to Please God is the title of chapter 4 in my Bible. First Thessalonians 4, starting verse 11. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business and to work with your hands just as we told you, so that your daily life... This actually kind of feeds into exactly what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, though, too. So that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. I mean, that's...
I think it was addressing like laziness at the time as well. I'm not sure.
Which again, I think is a powerful testimony to... Read that one more time, because that's
Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your hands just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. But I thought we were supposed to be dependent on the body.
You want to be independently dependent. So to have the capacity, and this is just a thought, this is not like, this is a teaching, so listen to what I'm about to say. But yeah, you want to be independent enough that you can sustain yourself, be a functioning member of society, somebody that others can rely upon, that you're able to offer help and assistance when needed, that the community has some level of respect. Not that that's your goal or desire to, hey, everybody respect me, look at the power I've accumulated and the wealth. It's like, that's not the motivation, but it is a testimony, like again what Paul just laid out. It's like, you're not here to be boastful and flashy and, hey, look at me, look at what I've accomplished, but it's like, you're somebody solid. Then you're in a place to help people when they are in need. You have something to give when there's something that needs to be given. You have the capacity to put your house in order, be responsible. Like, that's not what it means to be a Christian. It's just like, that some of it should be the fruit.
That's an overflow of...
Yeah, and not everybody can be Paul. Not everybody's going to spend their whole life on ministry, planting churches and writing God's word. But
none of us are.
None of us are. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, we don't all... that. I don't know. Yeah. Now this is the other thing I think about, and then I'll turn it over. I'll flip it back to you. Like, for me, I'm like, yes, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. That actually fits perfectly with what I'm already kind of doing. Excellent. I got a verse to back up my lifestyle. Now I'm good to go. And it's like, that's also, I don't think that can also be a trap. Yeah. We can also find the verses. So it's like, ultimately, a verse like that, I think, has to be filtered through. It has to be filtered through wisdom and discernment to say, yes, for this time, that does make sense. And maybe for that person who's not in that mode at all, they're being called to that, and they have to lay down their life to enter into that and it be led by the Spirit. Other people might be like doing that perfectly, good to go. And it's like, the Lord's like, no, I'm calling you into something more here. In this season, you're going to be on mission, or this season, you're going to be a little bit outside of your comfort zone. You're going to have to speak the truth. You're not going to be quiet in these moments. Like, so it's not a blanket statement all the time, everybody, everywhere, this is what you do if you're a Christian. I think there's got to be wisdom too and discernment. But generally speaking, I think it's a principle that would
just really ring
proof
true.
Text.
Yeah.
Proof text for me.
Were you about to say something?
No, I thought you were.
Yeah, I was. But I wanted.
You were, but I just ran right over it.
Yeah, that thought's long ago.
Lost it.
I've been listening to this guy, Dallas Willard. I think he passed away like a decade ago, but man, he's got some really good stuff. One of the things he was saying, just like an off comment, not really directly related to what he was teaching about, but what he said is one of the worst things to help poor people is to be poor.
Oh, there's no, what is it? There's no honor in being poor or something like that. I can't remember.
Oh, man,
go ahead.
What Bible version do you have? No, anyway, once again, then it's so easy to be like, yeah, so therefore I need to accumulate wealth, but that's obviously not what he's saying. What he's saying is like, by having resources and being dependent or being independent, there's a level where you now have the ability to help others in that regard. Where if I'm super poor and you're super poor, it's like, maybe we could barter a couple items, but I can't really. If I pull you, we're we're parallel at this point. Like, anyway, once again,
We're both trying to swim and we're both drowning. Neither one of us can save each other, help each other out.
Right. And it does come back to like this huge slippery slope and weighing the heart and what's my motives, because it can become like I have a ton of wealth, but literally I hand a little bit to people in need, but in general it's to provide for me. And so there's
I think
not one size fits all. One size fits
I mean, if
all.
we're gonna stick with like the money aspect of it,
Salesman of the year.
yeah, I think it's helpful to understand.
Is that a Gucci check?
This is a Costco.
Is that a hand purse? Brett, do you have a hand purse? A Gucci hand purse? What do you?
This is a Costco $12.
It's just the way you wear it, though. It looks.
Brett's like,
it looks
dude,
way more
I was about to
expensive.
say something. Of course, you just.
Like money, like we tend to like, I've earned this money, this is mine. It's like, well, if we keep the perspective like it's God's, then it's no longer mine to hold on to, and it can give it out wherever he wants me to give it out.
Up to 10%. Anything over 10%.
I don't even think that's a
90%.
rule. We don't
Yeah,
even
it's
have to
not.
give 10%. You can just do whatever.
Tithing's not in the New Testament, is it?
It's not in the New Testament.
We're not under the law. It's been fulfilled.
Yeah.
10% is God.
And if you gave all your money away, then you'd be poor. And Dallas Willard said, the poor can't.
Right. We could all probably.
No, I guess here's my main takeaway on all of that. It's like we can overanalyze, make it very legalistic and rule based, but it's like all of that should be discerned, and there should be wisdom in that. And it's like for this season, I mean, again, you might be called on in like 3 years to be like you are going to be you're going to be put in a place to make a radical sacrificial gifting to somebody or put them in a place that they can succeed. But you're only going to be able to do that if you're in a place to do that when that time comes. And it's like Brett said, instead of being like, it's mine, it's like, hey, I'm stewarding these resources for the time. The master might come back and be like, all right, what have you done with your talents that I left you with? Well, I hid mine in a field in the backyard. Here it is. It's like that. You did nothing with it. You didn't multiply it. There's no growth there. There's no development there. There's nothing. Thanks for my talent back, but that was not the reason I gave you those.
Yeah.
And if you're a good steward and you're making wise decisions and you're pursuing the right things, like I genuinely believe that the Lord will bless those things. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect and there's no suffering. Again, caveats to all of this. There's always. And
I think about the rich man.
Are we? I just want to make sure. Are we podcasting right now?
Are we
We're
recording?
17 minutes in, so
17 minutes. Wait,
We
when
started with the Civil War generals.
So this is the podcast. Okay, I just want to make sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating time of history, by the way, Civil War. But go ahead.
But I think about the rich man. He's like, oh, I've done all these things. I kept all the laws, whatever. And he's like, last thing, sell everything you have and give it away. And I don't think we've all been called to sell all of our stuff and give it away, but
I haven't.
we should be willing to sell all of our, like if there's something in us that's, I think we're missing it. Something in us that's wanting to hold on to something.
Sounds like you're feeling called and drawn. Is Alicia aware?
She's not on board with that.
Yeah.
We're
You're gonna have to
still
sell
in our,
that
we're,
Gucci
we're in
jacket.
our accumulation phase season.
Just gathering acorns. Gathering acorns.
Storing up.
Yeah.
for the
Storing
Lord.
up treasures in heaven and on earth.
So that you can spend the last 10 years of your life golfing.
Yeah.
In
That's
a
what it's
retirement
about.
community.
He's already spent the first 30 years of his life golfing.
Yeah, well, I stop now.
Mm.
Did you have I thought you were about to say something.
I was going to say something, but I don't remember exactly what it was. I've been reading in the Psalms, so let's just see where this goes. So I've been reading in.
Sounds fun.
I was going to say, I can make a correlation, but it might be loose. So
Let's not make a loose forced correlation.
Well,
Just share your
what I see. Okay, so in Psalm 71, it's David towards the end of his life. He's an old man towards closer to death. I don't know if he's literally on his deathbed at this point or not, but he's pretty much relaying. He says, "For you have been my hope, sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth. From birth I have relied on you. You brought me forth from my mother's womb. I will ever praise you." And so then he's kind of juxtaposing that with like, and I trust that you won't, because I think towards the very end of his life, I think Absalom, his son, is like pretty much trying to overthrow his kingdom, and things seem to be very disruptive, and in a sense, feeling like things are falling apart. And so I don't know exactly when the psalm was written, but it's kind of like, Lord, I'm going to trust you even at this phase when I'm old and gray-headed and towards death. But he's relaying this relationship that has started since a kid and a dependence upon the Lord since a kid. And what I think about is just, this isn't a money thing. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of a loose correlation here. But just in our lives, building that rapport, because one day, unless there's something, a surprise might not be the best word, but unless it's like a sudden death, like we'll kind of always be gradually growing closer and closer to the day where it's like we're that old man and we know that our day is near. And I want to be somewhat like David and be like, Lord, I was faithful I was a good steward of what you gave me and the call you put on my life since a child. And that rapport has been built up. So I'm not sitting on my deathbed like full of regrets and being like, oh God, please save me. Like, I know I completely dropped the ball my whole time. I trust that your grace is sufficient. But like, anyway, it was just kind of rings true with a little bit of what we're talking about, like Fen, the season you're in right now. And we're probably all in similar seasons to that. And once again, none of us are in full-time ministry. So there's that aspect of like, should we be doing more? Or maybe the doing more is kind of that Thessalonians passage where it's like, no, it's not doing more. It's doing it from as Jonathan's talked about, the bigger why in our life, if the why is oriented properly. So anyway, I just been kind of thinking about that. I'm like, man, and with young kids, it's like, I want to build them up so they can one day be like, I've been walking with the Lord since I can remember, because it's been instilled in me through my parents. And then it became my own thing whenever that time came where they fully just said, I'm going to submit my life to the Lord. And how beautiful that is. Cause it's like, we met last night on Wednesday night, with a small group of guys, and 3 of the dudes I'd went to high school with or had known in high school and stuff. And I was like, it's just so funny. We're all sitting in this room, but I never had any conversations with any of you while in high school about God. And we kind of all went around like, yeah, we all would say we were professed believers at the time. And I was like, there's so many segments of my life where completely dropped the ball on my call as a Christian. Time in high school, time in college, time in the military, a lot of the time before really a lot of my life has not been oriented properly in the functional day to day. So anyway,
well, I think that comes with maturity too.
Right, and we weren't like trying to be like, oh, we all dropped the ball, we failed, or we need to, throw up some Hail Marys or something. But we penance, is that the word? So yeah, since a child. Sounds like that really resonated with the group here. And
I was wanting to talk about money still, but
yeah, go back to it, man.
No, I'm just kidding.
I felt so convicted I just changed the subject.
I think the thing that we wrestle with, that we kind of always end up talking about, the theme of, if we can say that we have a theme to this podcast other than our musings and ramblings, is that it's like our striving, our goal, our desire is to be doing what Josiah just laid out. It's like living a life oriented to, in attunement with God, with Christ in us. And what does that look like, moment by moment, day by day? How should I be doing it? What should I be doing? Where should I be going? Where should I move? Should I start bringing homeless people to my house? Should I start sharing the gospel on every street corner? Should I quit my job? Should I go into ministry? It's like it almost And the answer to all those could be yes, or could be a resounding no. And you just don't know. There's having a peace about trusting that moment by moment, day by day. Like, one thing that keeps coming back to me is season. Go ahead real quick before.
No, I'm going to change. But like when you're saying that, I've always been like, because there's probably a lot of people that don't wrestle with that at all, and they would be legitimate Christians, or maybe not to a very strong degree. It's like, maybe I should be doing a little bit more over here, over there. But I do think there's people that just
doesn't even register.
It doesn't register, and I don't mean that in a way.
Has never even come up. Mind.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a way of like because they're a shallow Christian. What I'm saying is like, is the fact that there's a wrestling there, does that mean that there's a calling there for more? Or anyway, does that make sense?
Or is that just part of the?
Is that because somebody's been given 10 talents versus 1? And I don't mean talents in the sense of like ability, but just like a different call. Anyway, I know, but it's back to seasons. Just a thought.
Thanks for wedging that in there. I think that was good.
Well,
no, I'm joking. I think that's a good question because I think there's two people. There's two. You're like, why do some people who may not think about that? Or it's like, one, they probably. I think it's either camp one. You've never even considered the thought.
Like, have dinosaurs been on the ark?
Never.
You're either in that camp or you're not. Like,
you've either thought about that and have a thought and an answer to that question, at least what you believe, and you've thought it through, or you've never even considered it, and you're like, what? Anyways,
dinosaurs exist.
Don't worry, she's not listening.
But so there's I think there's that camp. Then there's the camp that's like, I've thought about it, but I'm feel 100% satisfied where I'm at because I'm living in that calling. I'm living in the proper orientation. I guess my thing is more like day to day, moment by moment. What does it look like to be living the perfect Christian life? And I'm like, what I go back to, it's like, I literally cannot do that. I'm 100% incapable of that. Christ alone is capable of living the perfect Christian life, moment by moment, day by day. And I have it's his life being lived out through me. It's so then it's like, okay, well, there's a freedom in that because it's no longer me striving to try to live the perfect Christian life. And I really mean that. It's like, it's not me trying to make it happen, but by surrendering, it starts to happen in my life in a way that's not rigid, legalistic, flesh-oriented. It's like it starts happening. It's a fruit. So it's almost, I don't know. There's a freedom in it. There's a when you realize that, there's a peace that comes over it. It's like, oh, I don't have to get it all figured out and do it perfectly right now in this moment. I can just submit and surrender and really pay my attention. And I mean that on purpose, like pay your attention to Christ in you. And everything else starts taking care of itself. And you'll look back and be like, whoa.
Yeah. I think that's where I fall on it. I mean, I still have times where I'm like, oh, should I go in the ministry? Like, is that what I'm supposed to do? I was like, I don't feel like I've had an explicit call to that. But then I reflect on, from a day-to-day level, I've maintained the same exact job, a lot of the same circle of friends. And yet, what I've noticed in the past 2.5 years is there's opportunities all around me that I didn't recognize for the first 7 or 8 years since I got out of the military and been working at this, as an insurance agent. I didn't really recognize that in some of my friend circles or conversations that were present. I didn't recognize that with some of my in-laws. And it's like, but as the past 2.5 years is the orientation of my mind and the orientation of my life, I've been directed more to be Christ-oriented and Christ-aware. Those opportunities have presented themselves in innumerable ways. And so kind of what you're saying is I can still get caught in overthinking things, but then I kind of pause and reflect on like, wait, all the cool stories that could be told about, like, oh, I had this conversation with this guy, and then I met so-and-so at this place, and I hadn't seen him in 15, 20 years, and now he's coming to a home church with us, or he's coming to a small group with us, and it's like all because as opposed to just being like, hey, what's up? It's like there's a level, it's like, God,
it's more like
is there
fruit
something
that
here?
You just picked off the tree, then I had to work to produce this.
Exactly.
And make
It's
it
that
happen,
idea
and
of that in 1 Corinthians, like, or in one of the Corinthians, maybe it's in 3. I'm just kidding. There's not 3, but there's that idea of like some are planting, some are reaping, like, but it's God who makes it grow. And it's like, but there's also that element in Luke, I think it talks about like the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. It's like, if we were all going out in our interactions, day-to-day life with just the people around us and had an orientation to say, God, is there something in this moment? And then when that prompting comes up, trusting that's from the Lord, and then being obedient with that and putting those things into practice. And then just, I hate to say it like this, but like, see where the cards fall. Like, see what that looks like over the course of a week, a month, a year. Because there's still going to be days and stuff where that you don't feel like anything magical happened. But then you start to look out over your life over a period of time. You start to see like, oh my gosh, there's been way more, I say cool things, but like my life has turned way more into an adventure and less of just a mundane routine working for the weekend so I can enjoy XYZ to go back to work on Monday. There's a whole nother layer of reality. The why is way more important, I guess.
I keep going back to a complete, like being expendable, like having no concern for yourself. So I look back at when I was attempting to play golf, but I would say that my why was that so that I could use that to honor and glorify the Lord. But there was still a self-focus in that. Now, like what I do work-wise is the last thing in the world I would ever want to do. But it's a selflessness. I don't know if I'm trying to tie that back into.
So here's a practical question, because our day-to-day lives, some of what we're talking about, living this quiet life, but yet oriented in the proper direction, like being aware of God and being available to Him and being intentional when those times arise. Like, I know I'm going to put people on, like, is there examples, or is there like, hey, I know you've talked about something with a guy in a car that you worked with and his seen your bracelet and having a little conversation there. I don't think you brought it up on the podcast, but I know you've had some interactions with clients, and also I think kind of tried to help out a church in the area with, providing them with a need that they needed fulfilled. And I don't know. Once again, I talked to Brett after the podcast last week about like finding that balance of like when you want to share things that are working in your life, but not share it from a place of like, look at all these cool things I'm doing. But it's like an outflow of like, here's some practical examples of like how it is all around us and how it's always available to all of us, not just Brett or Josiah or Fen, but like, I do think concrete examples kind of help people grab a hold of that in their life. So it's not just like these heady concepts of like, oh yeah, just let Christ live in you today, whatever your job is. And it's like, all right, well, how do I do that? Well, here's an example of what that would look like. I know I'm kind of, does anybody have an,
Well, I see.
or maybe that's not the right question.
Yeah.
Take it and run, Fen.
What's the exact question?
Is there examples of how that looks like in our life?
Have you been a good Christian recently?
No.
What have you done lately?
Well, once again, yeah. See, that's
If you
where
guys
it's like.
don't have anything? I have a couple. I'm giving you a hard time. I know.
No, but it's like, so
You asked the question
how do you
as soft
do
as
that?
you possibly could.
How do you? What does that actually look like practically in our lives? Where it's like, oh no, we're not called into ministry. We don't feel really convicted about the season of life we're in because we're busy and we have jobs and we have kids and we need to provide. But yet we all would say our number one orientation is to this higher why, which is God, and walking out and glorifying Him and sharing Him with others. So we have these two things, but then we don't really dive too much into, okay, this is what that actually looks like. Because most people I'm listening are probably not in ministry, because people who are in ministry are probably like, these people don't know what they're talking about. Or they got their own podcasts.
I'm tracking with you.
Without saying it explicitly, like, what does that actually look like
for example, I think...
Or does that just feel like we're just now, like, tooting our horns? Because we don't have to go there. But
no, I don't.
And maybe it's less of a... Maybe people know, and it's more of the following through.
I think you can talk... I can answer your question without, like, giving personal examples, so it doesn't sound like...
Yeah, that works.
But basically, yeah, it's like, okay, for example, if I'm out meeting somebody and there's like a opportunity to share the gospel or pray with the person or just be there and have a conversation for longer than is necessary about things that have nothing to do with the roof because this person is just screaming loneliness and need, then do that. If somebody could really use the helping hand in getting a situation taken care of, maybe there's a gifting there and a helping out that doesn't require so I think that's...
Let me ask you this. So
the being available.
So how do you recognize when those times... Is it do you feel like the Lord says something verbally to you? Is it just like a prompting in your spirit? Is it a thought in your mind? Like, how do you know, like, hey, this is a moment to be...
a thought and a prompting,
okay,
like a conviction.
I feel like those times are very clear. Just personally.
Yeah, no, this I think is...
In hindsight, there's been like those times where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do.
And, I feel like those times are very clear. And then when those times aren't clear and you're having those interactions, it comes from a place of you already pursuing the Lord. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like... Looking back, it's like I didn't recognize that time as a specific situation, but from this life that I'm living and pursuing the Lord, it happened. Does that...
Yeah, it's almost kind of what you're saying. It's almost like your self-focus is... There's almost a level where it's like you're not even out striving for those things to show up. It's almost like just a natural outflow of your relationship with the Lord. Yeah. Where it's like you're not like...
I'm not tooting my own horn.
Yeah, you almost reflect on the day like, oh, that was a God moment right there. And I actually was obedient in that without even knowing that I was like having to submit to God's...
It's almost like a blessing that you didn't realize it.
Yeah, which is interesting because I've been listening to... I think I brought it up earlier, Dallas Willard, but he kind of talks about kind of a little bit what God wants is... And I'm still trying to wrestle with this because I'm fully believe that we can't walk out the Christian life apart from Christ in us. Like Josiah's not capable of it, but yet there's a level where he's hands off on things. And what I mean by that is there's a level where he's trying to build up our identity, like us to walk in our... He lets his hands off of us so that we can start to walk on our own, like a little toddler. Like if we're always just holding their hands, like it's going to really, at some point they need to start to walk and fall over and get back up. And then eventually they're walking on their own. There's this level, but yet still independently dependent. And so there's this element where it's like
taking the training wheels off.
Yeah. Almost like because I've oriented my life so much towards God and I've been so in communion with him on a regular basis and in his word that like those things are just, that's just who I've become more and more. That is the characteristics. That's just, and it's not me, it's because it's my relationship with Christ and Christ in me that's the outflow of that. But it's less of in those moments, there's these huge friction points and it's like, I need to stop doing this and I need to do this. And I do think those times do come, and I don't think that that's anything wrong, but I do think there's also times where it's like, I wasn't even aware of that, and that was a God moment, but I didn't even recognize it in the moment. So anyway, I guess you guys both said two different things.
Well, something else that I was thinking about when you were asking that question but like I'll go to
Did I even ask a question?
I'll go to a lot of people's houses, customers' houses, and you just see like, okay, two examples. One, I went to a widower's house. Her husband, they'd been married for like 38, 40 years. He passed away like probably 5 months ago from when I was there to do the inspection. Like 5 months prior, he had passed away. And the lady broke down crying. She read me the guy's eulogy. It was it was a touching moment. She's a believer. But I'm like, Jesus is not present and real in this moment. She is crushed right now, just devastated, like feels without hope, like just completely shattered in this moment right now. So it's like, I spent some time with her, and it was I feel like the Lord was definitely there in that moment, but it's like Jesus showing up in her life right now is comfort and peace. And now then I go to other folks' house, and it's like you can just see the house is literally bursting with chaos, and it's just like life is completely out of order. It's just, in any way you can think of the word chaos, like you can just feel it and sense it. It's like, oh man, like Jesus could show up in their life with like practical, just life organization skills, practical showing up. And you know what I'm saying? It's like it's like Christ could show up in those moments, but like for both of those, like, and maybe this is what we're called to, but it's like for me personally to really help either one of those scenarios is like multi-year, multiple times a week interaction and like commitment and time to those people.
It's not just a one time.
Yeah, it's not like that is a self-sacrificial, like, hey, you're really pouring it. Now, when you do that with one of those, you'd almost literally have to pick one or the other, like really to be that person in that person's life. Now, I personally don't feel called to be that person in all those people's lives right now. I can't be. Christ can be, and other people can be a conduit to get Christ to them and to make him real in their lives. I mean, that's what ultimately I believe the church is called to, is to be Christ on earth to those people and to be a resource and a connection point. But it's like Christ is the answer in both of those situations. It'll manifest itself differently, but Christ is the answer. And how do we at least show a glimpse of that, point them in the direction, throw that seed, plant the seed. Maybe somebody else will reap that harvest later.
That's what I'm thinking of, is
and being okay with, I don't have the capacity. I would be neglecting so many other responsibilities that are genuine, I think, responsibilities at this season in my life to go and do that. And it's okay that I'm not the one who's going to be doing that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, what I'm hearing from you is like, maybe it's as simple as like, I'm not here to tend the field regularly, but I'm here to plant a seed and trust that the Lord will bring other people into their life. And as Christians as a whole are walking in obedience and walking out their faith day to day, there probably doesn't need to be Fen from Mooresville or wherever you live going to, I don't know
wherever I live.
Well, you're like in Enoch. You're in a weird little corner of,
It's like in Mooresville, China Grove, Salisbury.
Tell people I'm in the Rowan County side of Mooresville.
Yeah.
I go up to the lake and I'm like, yeah, I'm from Mooresville too, but not this part of Mooresville.
Yeah. But like, if Christians as a whole are walking out their faith and obedience with him, like Fen from Mooresville doesn't have to go to so-and-so, and I don't know if they're in Charlotte, we'll just say Charlotte, to be the touch point, because there should be Christians right around them that if they are walking out their faith, they would be the one that's tending that field. Mm-hmm. And so we have neighbors, we have coworkers, we have clients, and so once again, it's like as a whole, if we are all being obedient in the fields and in the things that we're doing day in, day out, until God prompts us to do something different, we have opportunities all around us that somebody planted this seed. So on Sunday, we were supposed to do this is a side, but it's also on Sunday, we were supposed to do a baptism for a guy at our parent. This is just a home church.
You
Kenendron.
You're going to just pile on your dad.
No, I wasn't going to go. But anyway.
He did say you got it heated up by about 12.
Yeah. So that morning, we were going to do it. My parents have a hot tub. And so the plan was do the baptism. And it was like the coldest.
It was like 18 degrees.
Yeah, it was really, really cold. Anyway, the hot tub would not start. And so we were kind of like, well, we could do it. It would be literally, I think it was like 33 degree temperature water. And the guy was like, let's just postponed for another week or two. And I get it, and it all works. It's all fine. But like in that moment, it's like, God, like get it working. Like we trust, like, I don't think this is outside of your ability. But anyway, it didn't happen. But that guy himself, like, I have had interactions with him over 8 years. Now, most of those years were not anything Christ-oriented, but in the past couple of years, him and I have had touch points like once every couple months. He would stop in, we would have a conversation, and most of them, I could see his growth, where it's like you can tell he's seeking for something, and then you come to this fruition of like, no, I've submitted my life to Christ, like he is Lord, like I've given my life to Christ, and once again, I had little touch points along the way. I was maybe a little seed here and a little seed there, or a little bit reoriented and pointed to Christ. But like whatever his life story and the conversations, he's got other people that are believers in his life that were probably pouring into him on a regular basis. But I got to see little fruitions of that. And my dad was the one that wrote his original policy like 20 plus years ago. And my dad was like, yeah, I still remember when I met with him, like, because I think he used to hand out a New Testament Bible to every single person. He's like, I remember having a conversation about him about Jesus. Once again, I don't even know if the guy remembers that, but there was a seed planted there. And so it's like, if we are all doing that along the way, then there's these touch points in people's life, and it doesn't have to just be Brett. And I do think there's a level we are called to disciple specific people in specific seasons. So I don't want to mitigate that. I'm not saying that that's not an importance. I think that that's a big importance. And I think there's an area where there's a big need for growth in that in America. But I do think, once again, if we are all oriented and we're all, as Christians, every interaction, there's an ability to, and a little bit of Jesus in those things, then it's like wherever the person goes, they're getting those touch points left and right.
The importance of being faithful and obedient with what God has put right in front of you.
Right.
It's like, and if God, like if I'm an insurance agent right now, that's what I should be doing and being faithful and obedient in. And if God calls me to something else, as I've grown, I've come to understand that when God speaks, it's very clear. It's not, maybe he's calling me. No, it's very clear. You look throughout Scripture. It wasn't, maybe this is God calling. It's like, no, it was very definitive. But just being faithful and obedient to where you are, and that's something that I've grown in.
Can I do a side tangent based off of what you're just saying? What I would caveat what you just said is I think there's an element where as Christians we need to have part of the discipleship also, I guess, is learning to hear and recognize the voice of God. So what the story that comes to mind is the story of Samuel. When Samuel's young, he's in the temple, Eli, he keeps waking up in the middle of the night, Samuel, and he keeps thinking it's Eli, and he goes to Eli, oh, go back to bed, like I didn't call you, happens again, go back to bed. And then the third time, Eli, who's been walking with the Lord for a longer set, you know what, that's probably the Lord calling you. When you hear that again, say, speak, Lord, for your servants. Listen, I do think there's an element, not that I can take that one story and quantify and say therefore that applies to everybody in all situations. I do think there's an element of growing in the awareness of how God speaks and recognizing his voice. And
that comes with spending time being in communion with him.
Right. So because I think there's people it's like, God doesn't speak to me. And it's like, well, maybe he does. It's just starting to draw on the awareness of how he's speaking and putting yourself in a position where he can speak. Because there are probably times where in seasons of life where people are just completely shut off from the voice of God because it's just completely quenched and, But anyway, I do agree though, as a whole, as we, what does Jesus say? Like, my sheep will know my voice. And so there's definitely a truth element to that. Anyway, that was a side.
Yeah. I mean, I just look back from my own experience where I've had like moments where I've like, I think that's God. And looking back, it's like, no, it wasn't. I think he makes it clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think there's.
But if you're not attuned.
So the word from our meeting last night was the word that keeps resonating with me is practice. And so, like, I think about practicing the presence of God from Brother Lawrence and, like, putting into practice what we know as believers in our day-to-day lives. And so I do think there's a level of practice associated with it. Hearing the voice of God, praying, practicing the awareness of God. So, anyway, I know that's a little different than what we're discussing, but I do think there's a level of practicing it in our life. And practicing it in a sense of, like, you're going to fall down, and it's okay. God's not like, you failed. You were trying to do that for me, and it didn't go. You never do anything for me again. You're actually not a child of mine anymore. I think we sometimes put ourselves into a paralysis state where it's like, I can't do anything until I'm 100% sure and I'm fully convinced. Once again, we can do things that are like, there's always a healthy level. We shouldn't be walking around like, thus saith the Lord kind of thing. Unless, like, beyond. There's a lot of times like, I feel like the Lord's asking me to say this to you. And just trying to be obedient with that. And if it falls flat on its face, maybe it was still from the Lord and just wasn't received on the other end, or maybe it wasn't from the Lord, but you're still, as a child, trying to practice the will of God and be obedient to those promptings, whatever that looks like. Or not.
I think that's good. I agree with what you just said.
So what distinguishes a good Christian from a bad Christian versus a good general from a bad general, to bring this full circle? So what makes General Lee an A-rated general, but yet somebody else who's cut from the same cloth, maybe same general upbringing, is a D general? They just fall flat on their face.
I was thinking too, it's like, so I was listening to that video of the guys rating the generalships. I'm like, well, do I want to be an A Christian or a F Christian? Or I guess there's a level that they had on their ranking system above A, which was Napoleonic. You could be a Napoleonic level general.
Napoleon was
not a Civil War general, but they used him as
like the best general.
One of the, I think he fought like 80 battles and lost maybe 2 or 3 of them. Again, he did lose and ended up dying on an island in St. Helen. Anyways, he was banished.
Did he lose in Waterloo? Was that the one that he lost?
To Wellington.
Is that movie out? Napoleon? Did that movie come out?
To help. Yeah, I'll be honest.
Don't watch it. It wasn't very good.
Very underwhelming. I'm like, that's not what I was hoping for.
Really?
They did more of a character
study
of Napoleon. It was not like we're going on campaign with Napoleon and there's a lot of battle and like explaining what's happening. Like none of that. It was like popping from scene to scene. A lot of him and Josephine, like that. Not what I was hoping for out of that movie at all.
I'm out of my depth with all the...
Anyways.
I'd seen the previews for it and I was like, I want to see that movie, and then I forgot all about it.
Terrible, but it's not what
Has anyone seen the movie with
I was hoping for?
The Manhattan Project? What was it called?
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, have you seen that movie?
No, I want to, though.
It's good.
I haven't seen it, but
it'll be on Peacock February 16th, I think.
Along with streaming your Thursday Night Football. No, that's Amazon.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Peacock's Sunday night.
All the money I spent just to watch Thursday Night Football. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't watch it. But I do remember the very first week, Chessa was like, it's not on TV. I was like, it looks like it's on Amazon Prime. Guess we're not watching football on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's a big racket.
Yeah, and then one of the playoffs games was on Peacock exclusively.
I don't know. I hadn't watched any of it.
Also,
wow, man, oriented in the proper direction.
You asked me. So,
sorry,
like,
dude.
Some of the things I was thinking, like, cause some of the generals were very. He's like, he was fine, but he wasn't great. There was no ingenuity or like imagination in any of his tactical plans. He could get guys where he needed to get them, but he was very non-aggressive. He didn't have any amazing victories, or he just kind of was there. and kind of filled a place, and that was it. Then you've got others that, man, he was a tactical genius. He ran a good staff and good organization within his army. He kept his men with good resources and good equipment and kept them fed, and he moved them appropriately. He didn't waste their lives in frontal attacks at a fortified position. Like he was doing all the little things right.
Never do that.
He and you could see it's like, again, there's a lot of just practical things that are like, some of them are very courageous, others were big cowards, and they hardly ever were even close to the action at all. So it's, again, and I don't care if it's a Civil War general or any other potential role. Like, I'm a roofer now, and 150 years later. But there's certain things I could say a list about being a roofer that are like, hey, do these things and you'll do better than if you don't do these things. You'll get a higher rating. And again, I think that's, the Bible gives a lot of good practical examples throughout the New Testament of what it looks like to be a Christian, but it does not like say, here's the 5 things. Every day, do these exact 5 things. It's not that way. It's very much relational and relationship driven. Imagine having a rule book of this is what you do when you're married for 5 every day. Just do these 5 things and you're good. It's like there could be a list of 5 things that are good, practical things that you should be integrating in your relationship, but it's like it's not the time for all those things all the time. There's certain have some wisdom, discernment. And I think it's really a relationship, a discerning spirit, listening and being aware that God is speaking to you, taking action when you do hear his voice, and be responsible with the things he does give you and the direction he does lead you in, and say, all right, I'm going to start walking that way. I do think we way overcomplicate the whole thing sometimes, but
Yeah.
there's also you got to get a kick in the butt sometimes. Like, hey, we can talk about being oriented and hearing from God and having some wisdom and discernment and going the right direction, and here's some principles about a Christian. But it's like some people are not even in that realm yet. They're not even like thinking that way at all, and they need to be pointed there and maybe walked alongside, discipled to get them to that point. It's a both end, but knowing how to interact with somebody is also, I think, wisdom and discernment, and trusting that the Lord's going to help guide that. And then there's a peace when you realize it's not all on me. I just need to trust.
Trust and obey.
Man, we were all over the place. Hopefully there's some thread of...
We talked about, I think I said after the podcast, but if true north is Christ, if you're starting at one location on the map and I'm starting from another location on the map, like, our paths are going to lead different. We're going to the same direction, the same final point, but we're going to be coming from completely different paths, even though our life's... Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I think as Christians, sometimes we say, well, if you're oriented towards Christ, you need to fall in line with the path I'm on. Like, you're obviously not doing it because this is what it looks like. You should be following, because I'm following the path. This is what it looks like. But if we all are oriented in the proper direction, but we're all coming from different places and we're all coming from different callings, but if we're properly oriented, then we're providing a wider.
So you're saying there's many paths to Christ?
No, I'm saying there's one orientation, which is Christ, but we are all.
This is where doctrine is.
This is where
I'm tracking. I'm giving you a hard time. I track with 100% what you say. It's like you following Christ might look different than me following Christ. But
Christ
still
is
the
true
same
north.
Truth in Christ.
So if you're like,
lives.
I'm gonna get the true north by going south, it's like, no, that's not. But it's like, I'm gonna get the true north. Like, I'm going true north.
Where you are at on the map.
But Josiah's
heading north.
You're a different part of the body.
Right. Exactly. And I think we get caught up on that. I think that. Yeah. And so that
he was a nose hair.
I think there's that continual recognition of that, where it's, if we are all being obedient to where we are at in different locations,
But the
physically,
the mission's the same.
Exactly.
The means by which we carry out that mission's different.
Exactly. Yeah. The why is the same. The how and the what it looks like may look different.
If we were all if we were all called to full-time ministry, the world would shut down.
There'd be a lot of vacuums in the world where...
Well, how would you engage in everyday life? You couldn't. You can't just stand
There'd be nobody to tithe the church because everybody would be working for the church.
We are the church.
There's practical words like it doesn't make sense. Now, that being said, and this is where it comes back to it matters with the heart, because there's probably so many people that live in that realm where it's like, oh, so I can still do my thing under the shelter of I'm not called to do all these things over here. And so that's where it's like, depending on who's listening to it, where they're at, they might feel convicted, or they might be like, oh my gosh, there's a freedom here, a weight's lifted, his yoke is easy, and I can be obedient with the things around me. I don't have to be like going in. It's only specific times and specific places, like it's available all around me, whatever you're calling it. If you're a cashier at a gas station versus you're a roofer, or what do you do, Brett?
I say a forklift.
Forklift salesman or an insurance agent. So,
Word
up.
Brother John, we miss you.
Yeah.
yes. We trust that you will have heard that part right there. You had to make it to the end. Those awkward pauses, just that vacuum, Jonathan not there.
Yeah.
Those were intentional today.
Moments of silence.
Oh, me.
Who's going to pray us out since John's not here to do it?
Brother Brett.
Josiah, you got it.
I mean, I will, but I feel like this is your opportunity to talk, Brett. Okay. God, we love you. We thank you. We thank you for this ability to be able to just ramble and chat and talk. And Lord, ultimately with the orientation and the direction of bringing it back around to you. We don't do it perfectly, Lord. We fall over, but we trust that in the midst of our trip ups, and Lord, as we're learning how to walk more fully in who we are in you, Lord, that you're working in and through us, Lord. So I just pray that whoever's listening, whether there's a little clip here, a little segment there, or maybe somewhere they were able to follow the thread along the whole way, Lord, that those little moments that stuck out to them, Lord, maybe those are moments where you're speaking to them. So we just ask that whatever seeds were planted, Lord, that they are nurtured and grown. And we just thank you for your faithfulness, and we love you. And we just ask this all in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Until next time.